Professor James Leglisho, Ole Kiyapi, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you, John.
Professor, you wish to become president of this country, and your manifesto states that you would ensure that there is food availability for all, accessible and quality health care, quality education for children, economic empowerment, equal opportunities, a united and secure Kenya. Professor, we've all read manifestos before, and one has cause for a certain cynicism in their actual application. What makes you so sure that yours is going to be different?
Because, John, where I come from, that's what I've been doing all my life as a professor. I've been doing practical things, teaching kids to university level, grading thesis, as a technocrat in the ministries of government, environment, medical services. So this is really my background. My background is making things happen. And so the things that we are proposing are things that are practical. They are things that are relevant.
I have no argument with that. I have a certain apprehension about the use of this pronoun I. I have this wonderful track record, and therefore I shall deliver. Now, I've heard you speak in public fora in the past, and you've said things like they're doing this, they're voting huge sums of the money to themselves. In my government, this won't happen. I, me, everything is vested in James Ole Kiyapi. I think that's unsustainable.
No, I don't think it is about Ole Kiyapi. The reference of I here simply means, as the team leader, you want to move your team in a certain direction. You must have targets. You must have a vision. You must clarify your purpose. And therefore, it has nothing to do...
There's an oblique criticism of the Kibaki government for which you worked, in the sense that there wasn't this clarity of purpose. Or would you say that let it continue? If he were into wonderful health, let him continue for another 20 years. You were part of that government.
In a sense, and I don't really want to exonerate myself or extricate myself from the Kibaki government. There was a sense in which I was part of it, but there was also a sense in which I responded to a higher authority and therefore executed the mandate that was delivered to me. Deliver this. And
the higher authority being the Kenyan people you're suggesting?
The higher authority means, in this case, a Kenyan cabinet.
Right.
And when you have a cabinet that is incoherent,
right,
then you have a problem. Right. And for me, President Kibaki did a very good job, except for the fact that the ministers were not necessarily always pulling in the same direction. And that was a big challenge, especially so with the Grand Coalition government. And I think that we had great programs, sometimes good intentions, but the execution was just not synchronized. And Professor, that's really what I mean by saying...
You mentioned, you mentioned the word team, but sorry, I cut you short. That's what you really mean by saying?
No, when I say Kiyapi, the team leader, Kiyapi, the president, Kiyapi, the leader, I mean is Kiyapi and the team. I don't really mean...
And I wish to draw you on this word team.
Yes.
Now, the Constitution says that ministers, for example, the technocrats will be executive. They'll be chosen from the populace, men and women of character and integrity. Now, your team, is this a team that's going to be sort of discussed in darkened rooms? Or if I were to challenge you now and said, of the maximum of 22 ministers that you were to have, do you have a minister for education in mind? You don't necessarily have to name him or her. Do you have one in mind? Are you going to make up your team as you go along?
There is a team already, and it's not full, it's not complete. Let me just tell you a little bit of how I started this. I started following the post-election violence. I felt challenged as a Kenyan that it was unacceptable that the most educated Kenyans, John Kiyapis, are sitting back and allowing our country to go into ruin. And yet we have these brilliant ideas and we couldn't bring it to bear on the nation. So I started engaging professionals, and those who would be listening to me know it is true. From 2008 I said, we are partly to blame for this mess. And my view has always been the middle class, the professional class, are the real the engines of transformation of Kenya if we really want to
They may
transform.
well be, Professor. They may well be.
Yes.
But if you're working demographics, there are two things that come into play. One of them is this idea of the middle class. The politicians that are going out to stadia to address the masses, the middle class are not there dancing with them at a jig at every single rally. You wouldn't find John and Kiyapi going across to a stadium to dance with Uhuru and Raila and the rest. So, for example, so we don't count. We don't count if you're mentioning us in one breath. The other thing that you must take into consideration, Professor, is this whole idea of ethnicity. You being Maasai, one might have said, well, you don't have a chance because you're appealing to this middle class of 1% who might not even turn up to vote. Who might not even turn up to vote.
And you have raised a lot of questions there.
I have, because we've got so little time.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that there's the political process itself, which raises a lot of questions. And if you follow that political process that has no regard for values and what Kenya should stand for, then unfortunately you might end up just getting the same leaders that you've been complaining about. But if on the other hand, John and others will get into that process and raise the questions and be part of the population and mobilize the population, then of course we will take it to another level. Will we achieve exactly what we want? Maybe exactly not the first time round, but we will move it to another level. And
so you're one of your aims is to set a historical precedent. You realize that you can't really make it, but it's a bit like being the first woman, Geraldine Ferraro in the States. You want to be the first, then maybe 20 years from now, the history books would say,
I have two goals.
James Ole Kiyapi was a good man who didn't become president because he couldn't.
I have two goals: to become president, because the Kenyan people want change, and they have been waiting for this change for a long time. Unfortunately, the change agents were scared to come out. That's the one goal, that Kenyans are waiting for you and me to go and say, here we are. But the second goal is that even then, we must raise the agenda, the leadership agenda, to another level. The conversation, the quality of leadership. Am I going to get all the professionals that I would like to have? Maybe not. But shall I have at least a percentage, a contribution? Yes. And if we win, and when we win, I would like to form a team that will excite the country. That's really what I want to do. And I want to take it back to the people and say, this is about you. And I refuse to just flow along with everybody.
So, for one thing, are you a good dancer? Have you perfected your dancing skills?
Absolutely.
Right.
And it's very exciting for them to say, our permanent secretary is suddenly coming down here. We believe him because he was consistent always. He never told us a lie. They don't see me as a traditional politician.
I think you give yourselves too much credit. I don't think that the Kenyan populace of 40 million people have this secure memory of this delightful man called Ole Kiyapi who solved all their problems when he was a permanent secretary. When he was a permanent secretary, not a minister.
But shift the argument. Yeah. It is really not about a particular individual. Just go back to your earlier question.
Exactly.
It is not about I. It's about, I'm telling Kenyans, this is about us. This is about us. This is Kenya. Arise for it. Stand up for it.
Right.
And a lot of them are listening and they say, yeah, this is different. We haven't had this before.
Right.
And therefore, for me, I'm excited about that. That's already a win. That's the first step. And the second step is actually the ballot. And I believe that when finally they look at and listen to all of us, and they go to the ballot and they say, am I actually living out this guy and stay where I am even right now? And nobody ever wants to stay where they are. Everybody wants their children to go to school. Everybody wants a better house. Everybody wants income in their pocket. And therefore, anything that brings hope and a promise, people will consider.